primary entity that will act among other players who brought in which were controlled by the justice. And ultimately, draft that now got back and is a subject of motion. The motion, therefore, that is before this House today is one that has matters beyond the committee, matters beyond the House, and I urge the honorable members to support. And Madam Speaker, I would like to request ADH to second this. I thank you.
I also want to thank other Senator Met. I think, Madam Speaker, there is no other important that can mention to us one of this report. The Joint Committee looked at this report from the National Assembly and our Senate have worked on. My reasoning is very simple, Madam. All the problems of the country lies on what and the subsequent, rather the mediation of the all our problems as a country come conflict of. Madam Speaker, there is a report called the Ndegwa Report, Ndegwa Commission. The Ndegwa Commission report, Madam Speaker, was presented to Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya, May 1960. That report is available online. That is also with Parliament. And the 398 report, Madam Speaker, very, very rich report. Report that is a additional paper that were written by amazing patriots like Tom Boyer. But there is a part of that report that I think has been seriously disastrous. Part of that report was when the Ndegwa Commission report suggested that civil servants can be able. This is our biggest as a country. And despite the good intention that was that report, because when you read that report, and I find it extreme in terms of just rethinking public service structure, as well as public servants. Because, Madam Speaker, that before 1971, public servants in this country used, and alongside that, they were really not allowed to do. Service was that exactly that. Service, public service, you're called to, you are able to do what you're called to do, a public servant for the nation. But the remuneration was very, very shallow. But, Madam Speaker, the moment this country opened for the public servants in this country be able to do business and create great wealth for themselves, it did not just stop at the idea of free market economy. It also meant that public servants then go ahead and engage in doing. And that is where the rot of this problem is, that years later, it has become now an in our budget, especially when you think this problem is not only within the assemblies, that Senate, National Assembly, as Parliament, but it's also now becoming a serious replica, even in the county structure, involved units, where the budgeting process made by the civil servants having queued and having secured a number of procurement opportunities that defrays the public services that they in a various number of that can only become synonymous voracity of serious resources getting in, but the public never see where this money. Madam Speaker, it is easy today for Gen Zs, younger generation, fight why our country is hemorrhaging in terms of yes, taxation, but without service. But they can never get to that problem if we strive to this. Is the first report that I see as an attempt to undo the wrongs of the Negwa. Because, Madam Speaker, if you look at other countries today, the countries that our young people are admiring, even if you take the Nordic countries, where young people are admiring when they point that, Madam Speaker, they're the highest form of taxation. But people there don't riot against taxation. In those countries, citizens of those countries never complain about taxation. Why? Because tax raised by government goes and does what the country needs to do in terms of providing services. Madam Speaker, you know that today, if you are in Norway, or if you're in Denmark, or if you are in Sweden, there are what we call services that are provided by government, but there's also what we call tax benefits. That even women in those countries today can go to work knowing very well that government will even invest in the aftercare of their children. But in our country today, the tax that is raised finds its way in the pocket of by simple issue of civil servants do government. This is the crust of what I call conflict of interest. That the others are not as bad as compared to this. Because today you come to Parliament and individuals have perfected the art of scavenging for what will be in the budget tomorrow, on which road is belong to who, and which pseudo company am I going to put, including some proxies that are then going to be able to supply or do certain work government for which, because they are sitting at the seat of accountability, they cannot hold themselves to account. And nobody else can hold them to account, because the moment they have put a number of budgetary allocations to projects that they want to do with serious and dubious companies, then when it comes to this Parliament, they will sanitize themselves. And therefore, almost 70% of our taxes never go any job. Inflation in the procurement processes in this country is an endemic problem that is becoming difficult. Because we have put in the DNA and the psyche of Kenyans that you actually don't need to be an entrepreneur in this country. You don't need to think about enterprising economy. Because the simplest way to get to wealth, the simplest way to amass wealth, whether primitively or in a pseudo manner that you are hiding, join government. Whether you join government as a legislature, whether you join government as a body in the judiciary, whether you join government in the executive, you are rest assured that you will be wealthier than any entrepreneur who has spent 20 years doing business. This is a menace that young people, serious patrons in this country, must rise to look at the eye of what the bill and the mediated version of this bill is posing, so that we can be able to deal with this menace once and for all. And it's not going to be easy. Madam Speaker, since 1970, date, when Duncan Ndegwa and the central bank sat together to rethink the public service structure of this country and endorse this kind of a commission report, and the resultant behavior of public servants being able to actually harvest from the public coffers to date is not an easy thing to fight. Even as we pass, as we support this report and further go to agree as a House with our partners in the National Assembly to be able to actually make this bill come to life, Madam Speaker, we have got a serious war waged against enterprising in government. It's a big problem. It's a big problem that if we don't give this particular bill, once it becomes law, we give it some truth, it will never be easy to run government. And Madam Speaker, it ends up going as well with the idea of abuse of office, Madam Speaker. People only abuse office because they have got power, able to procure the services of whichever laws that are supposed to be able to enforce the laws in this country, or entities that are able to enforce laws in this country. There's an ongoing debate right now, Madam Speaker, on what is going on in the judiciary. Remember in 2007, when after the crisis that we have in this country, we are rethinking and investing on rethinking our constitution, when some of the patriots in this country, including Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga at that time, were fighting so hard that we have a judiciary ombudsman. So that as we think about independent commissions that we have had in this country, Madam Speaker, those independent commissions like judiciary, we can be able to have ombudsman. People did not want it. And today, Madam Speaker, I dare say confidently that one of the most procured institutions of enforcing our laws in this country, Madam Speaker, is the judiciary. Because how do you explain, Madam Speaker, when a matter of urgency is put before a court of law in this country that needs a determination within 2 days or 3 days? For instance, what happened in the National Assembly when a determination was needed to be done within the time that the National Assembly was supposed to pronounce itself on who are the majority leader in the House. Then the judgment comes 2 years later, Madam Speaker. How do you explain that if it's not the procurement of the services of judges in this? Who oversights our judges? The parliament can be oversighted by the judiciary. The executive can be oversighted by parliament. Who oversights our judges? The abuse of office has come to the extent that this House has witnessed the creation of an independent institution called the EACC. And Madam Speaker, we sit in the committees of the House every single day. Today I was in 3 committees, Madam Speaker. We look at the reports by the Auditor General. We find serious variances that have led to public loss of funds in counties, Madam Speaker. We pronounce ourselves in those committees. We send it to EACC, Madam Speaker. 2 years later, no government, even a single, is held to account. What is that if it's not procuring EACC, Madam Speaker? What is that if it's not procuring DPP, Madam Speaker? What is that if it's not procuring DCI, Madam Speaker? The abuse of office is not just a simple issue of the backlog and the bottlenecks that we have with investigation. It is clearly intertwined with the issue that because the public service in this country has allowed public servants to make humongous amount of money, we have made a country where people in government have built a buddyism system where they are protecting themselves and do not allow taxes of this country go back and serve our people. So, Madam Speaker, I believe very strongly, as a young person in this country who has sat in this House time without number, listening to my elders and ranking members in this House speak about the challenges of providing water in this country, about the challenges of providing gas in this country, about the challenges of providing medicine in this country, that I know when I sit in the Finance and Budget Committee, Madam Speaker, that is totally possible not to borrow money and provide these services to our people because we have got capacity to raise taxes. But the hemorrhage of those taxes and the lifestyle that our people see, the politicians live, the judges live, the people in the executive live, merely 1 or 2 months after getting into office, Madam Speaker, is a pandemic in this country that we must confront through this bill, Madam Speaker. So I've never been happier about a committee that has sat together in a joint session, the committee that sat and mediated this version of this bill. And I want to thank my brothers and sisters from the Senate and my brothers and sisters from the National Assembly for the version they have come up with, because they have done something unknowingly. They have done something unknowingly of dealing with the Ndegwa Commission that brought us this menace in our country. And I hope that we can fast track this particular bill, come to this House, we agree on that mediated version and give it life and go further, make sure that we're going to champion its implementation outside the presence of Parliament. Because we are leaders who have been elected by the confidence of people in this country. We have been given the mandate, we have been given trust. Even today, Madam Speaker, I dare say that I know that the President today is facing a lot of scathing attacks on the issue of taxation, and scathing attacks on the issues of high cost of living, scathing attacks on why he has entered deeper into the pockets of individuals who are getting salaries in this country. But I can say that that is not the issue. The issue is that people have lost confidence and trust in the public service in this country because of the lifestyle we have chosen to live and the services we have chosen not to give our people by simply being able to trade with government and enrich ourselves as public servants and state officers that do not allow the taxes to go back to our people. It is possible, Madam Speaker, that we can have high taxation as well as higher services to our people. It's possible in our generation. It is possible to restore the confidence of our people in governance in this country. And the journey of that confidence of our people on the President, on us legislators, on the judges in this country, starts with making sure that the conflict of interest is given life. It's not simply passed by mere action of Parliament, but is given life and make sure that the idea of enterprising in government, that people are scared of confronting, that members of Parliament are scared of facing, and be able to come to an end in this country. Because if you go to a place like Britain today, Madam Speaker, if you are a public servant who has become a public servant, give the private sector the opportunity to serve the government as the first market in an economy. Let the private sector thrive in making a stronger market economy that can truly give jobs to people. There are jobs that will not only be quality in scale, but also vast and diverse in scale. Because, Madam Speaker, the idea that public service has become a place where even people come with the concept of ghost workers is now becoming a menace in our country. Why is that possible? It is only possible because of conflict of interest. Because people in government have become very comfortable with the idea that if I'm in a place of power, I can create jobs that don't exist, and therefore pay money where there is no value for that money, and be okay that I'm protecting my own. If I'm a Kikuyu, I'm protecting a Kikuyu. If I'm a Kalenjin, I'm protecting a Kalenjin. If I'm a Luo, I'm protecting a Luo because I've got opportunity to employ them for jobs that don't exist. And spending money that is hard earned by Kenyans where I don't need to spend it. When I could as well easily stop the conflict of interest of employing my own and simply empower and endorse a market economy where the private sector can be able not only to create jobs, but also go ahead and build an economy that works. Madam Speaker, today I was looking at the BPS that have been brought before me in the House. And Madam Speaker, I can see the inflation has gone down. I can see the inflation is going down. But I cannot relate the inflation, the cost of goods and services in this economy. I am seeing the current account of government is very positive, Madam Speaker. But that current account, not as a result of export increase in our economy, is as a result of import decrease in our economy. Meaning that the economy is not thriving. There's no production that's happening in this economy because nobody sees where the tax is going. Nobody ever sees where the tax is going. It's not empowering businesses. It's not providing services. And Madam Speaker, right now we are at a very big scare. Where USAID, if you look at ODA in government, the services that are supposed to be done by ministerial agencies that we get grants for. But if you look at off ODAs which are not in government, like where USAID comes in place, able to give a few grants, like providing water in the slums, provide Medicare for people who cannot be able to get it. Madam Speaker, most of that money end up going to the pocket of in terms of administrative cost. I want you to think about it, Madam Speaker, in a minute. Think about it. With the pronouncement of Donald Trump, the President of the United States, that USA now is not going to give us any money. Have we imagined as a country where we are going to go, services that were being lifted by this? What is going to happen, Madam Speaker, is that our government is going to start thinking about spending again our taxes in offering services in that gap. Because when this is still on in government, for us it is still goes on in government, and that menace of ODAs again comes to the government, we are going to face a crisis in this country that can lead to another uninformed revolution and make this country ungovernable. So I not only stop at seconding this bill as I'm seconding it, but also urging us to go back and reflect as leaders in this country, that do we want to go with this idea of trade government? Do we want to go with this unsustainable idea of hemorrhaging government and accumulating wealth from government? I don't think we want, because we collapse our country based on. Madam Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Education Committee on Conflict of Interest laid on the table of the Thursday. Further, that 113 and Standing Order 1673 of the Senate approves the mediated version of the bill. Senator Rarge?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. I have read the report, but I found it. Madam Speaker, I am a strong. This country, Speaker, facing non-implementation. We don't have a shortage, Speaker, of laws that can fight corruption. This report, conflict of is and should be that EACC cannot have capacity to fight white-collar crime, transnational crimes. You remember in the UK, the famous case of Chicken Gate. The UK could nail down the suspects, but Kenya is yet to. You remember the issue of the dam that is in Harry, where even the DCI had to travel to Italy, but there is nothing that come out of it. And as Speaker, as Parliament, what we should is that, are we appropriating enough funds, capacity, and ability for EACC to prosecute white-collar crime? That should be having to do. I don't see, because if you look at the report that anti-corruption EACC has brought before the Senate, is about conviction of bribery of 20,000 shillings, 10,000 shillings, traffic office. But governors who are facing allegations of corruption, senior national are facing allegations have never been. The only case that we saw that has made a headway is the one of Waititu, where more than close to 600 million was being adjudicated upon Madam Speaker. But people feel that there was no proper and punitive decision by the court. So from the onset, there are many laws that can fight corruption. Because, Madam Speaker, if I take you to section 42, where conflict of interest has been defined, under the what we call Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, number 3 of 2023, 203, as revised in 20.
Order, Senator.
I think the new chairs, Madam Speaker, from the respected of. Madam Speaker, when you look at number 3 of 2003 Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, advised in 2015, Section 42 defines what conflict of interest is, Madam Speaker. One of the grounds, when you look at, Madam Speaker, one of the grounds of corruption, and that is a question the committee should tell us. The corruption offenses, Madam Speaker, are 1, bribery; 2, conflict of interest; 3, corruption, fraud; 4, bid rigging; 5th, misappropriation of funds; 6th, embezzlement; 7, abuse of office; 8, dishonesty in taxes; and the last one is election-related offense. Has been defined as corruption, Madam. So does it mean that we will have to do a law on, for example, Bribery Act? I know it is there. Does it mean we'll do about embezzlement or bid rigging? The law is already there, the anti-corruption law. The aspect we should be discussing is about the enforcement of and the fight against. That is when Kenyans will build the issue. The issue of whether public servants are doing business with government is neither here. That's a moving target. Because, Madam Speaker, if you are all of us, if conflict of interest, for example, today was passed, all of us who do farming are side hustle, or you are selling animals like Senator Murgo, or anybody else, we will have to stop. So we need to be very careful so that we don't, Madam Speaker, with the thinning of the pay slip of many Kenyan workers, they are forced to do side hustle, Madam. Does it mean it's conflict of interest when you, after the Senate is adjourned and you go and look at your kuku somewhere, your ngombe somewhere, Madam, with your indulgence of use? But the point is we need to be very honest so that, Madam Speaker, we don't, what should happen? And I've seen EACC and Senator Okiya Omtata, the indomitable lion of Busia is here, is charging people with conflict of interest, but they can't establish the link. Madam Speaker, in Nandi the other day, when the scandal of payroll emerged, close relatives of Governor Sang were found to be in the payroll of the county payroll. No one up to today has been charged. And Section 42, the EACC cannot argue today that they don't have the law to charge. Section 42 of Anti-Corruption Economic Crimes Act of 2003, as revised, provides for definition of what is conflict of interest. It is about the enforcement and fight against it. It is not about anything else. We need to appropriate more resources. Our judges, I know there is an issue with the Supreme Court at the moment. And there are procedures on how that one can be handled, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I want to appeal that what we are having at the moment, Madam Speaker, is something more serious, because I have seen the committee observe that the bill seeks to consolidate all the conflict of interest in public service. But I expected the committee, joint committee of National Assembly and the Senate, to come up on how we can clean up. They have not given us, in all referrals that they have done, they have said, we will do laws relating conflict of interest in public service, consolidate. Why didn't the committee come up with a proposal? How long will we take? We know we are midterm of the Senate. Can the committee, the Joint Committee of Mediation, come up with a version of legislative intervention agreeable by the both houses so that we can fast track, Madam Speaker, so that it becomes very easy. Madam Speaker. So the committee should have given us a legislative intervention on how consolidate the role relating to conflict of interest in public service, so that we know. Madam Speaker, most of the civil servants have told you they have side hustle. Some people are hiring tilling and Narok, they are planting wheat. Does it mean since you are a principal of school X and on weekend when you are off you are seeing your wheat in Narok, does it mean that's conflict of interest? Because you are earning from different. So, Madam Speaker, we need a legislative intervention that will tell us how the conflict of interest is handled in the public service. And assume you are a chief somewhere, Madam, and your husband is hired as an ACC in Malindi, and you are a chief somewhere in Yakach. What does the law say? Because you are related by marriage, or your son applies for a job you are not aware. You are a senator here, your son applies to your job, the Public Service Commission, they are hired. Can somebody say that's a conflict of interest? So we need to be very clear so that we don't play. I've seen people getting excited because this below some United Nations, some NGOs, we need to pass this law. Madam Speaker, when you look at principles of law, we should do the law that functions within the society of Kenya. This law is a law that has been brought by the NGOs and people who want to look for the Western countries. The other day they stopped you. No, so Madam Speaker, we need to be very careful so that we don't import things that can easily abort in our society. You and me know that you can have as many cousins as thousands. Does it mean if your cousin of your cousin of your cousin is hired, for example, in county government and you are the senator? What does it say about conflict of interest? So let us not rush, and I thought this mediation version should have involved both houses, Madam, so that we don't set ourselves up against our own society, Madam. Another aspect I wanted to point out, because I have 3 points, is on the issue. I agree in clause number 41 that we need to limit the time of suspension. 90 days. The leave of court if they. We saw governors, a number of governors, when they were under investigation corruption case, they are being suspended because they have executive powers. 90 days is enough. In fact, my time, Madam Speaker, when I used to be the chair jailer, we had even proposed that the case of corruption should be add and dispensed. In the last session, we came up with proposal. In fact, at that time, we had a multi-agency team that was co-chaired by the chairs of JLAC in the National Assembly and the Senate, and the members were AG, NIS, KRA, and we sat in this same chamber, and we agreed that corruption cases must and should be dispensed within. And I agree with the chair that some people could take advantage. But what do we prevent when the gossip and your political saboteurs want to remove you from office? We must guard against that. These 90 days, I agree with the committee that it is more than sufficient. Let somebody be suspended from the office if it is a governor, but let it make it 90 days. Let them investigate and prosecute. But the committee should have added that the corruption cases must be added and be dispensed within. Because we know the backlog that is there in the courts of law. The fight against corruption cannot be won easily. You remember the former president, and I think the current CS has said we lose. The government has tried to streamline payment of government services through it. And we are yet to see that. The benefit of, you can see if we are losing 2 billion per day, it looks like we have domesticated corruption. The fight against corruption, we must be strict. And therefore, 90 days should and must be applied in governance because they have executive powers that can be done, but also the case should be added and determined within us. And I think judiciary should take the lead. I know judiciary is facing a lot of challenges at the Judicial Service Commission. I've had people saying we should have formed judiciary ombudsman. to the complaints, but I believe the Judicial Service Commission has powers to do so. And in any case, judiciary, we don't want jury pessam. You saw the ruling of majority and minority. It took 2 years for the court. What is that? As we went to, Madam Speaker, you are aware in the last session, led by our Speaker Emeritus, Makelo Lusaka, and then the Deputy Speaker, the current Deputy President, and yours truly was the chair of JLAC. We did draft pleadings that moved to for justice, well done, on 24 legislations that had been passed without concurrence of the Senate by the National, including the health laws, which health is. Can you believe up to today the courts have never given a direction about such intervention? That's why sometimes we are not, judiciary is not beyond criticism. That's why we are telling them, do stop, fast track these cases. You have even learned cases are staying here for 30, 40 years. And that is why we are telling judiciary backlog. But I want also to blame Parliament to some extent. Madam Speaker, judiciary has even, if judiciary goes for 40 billion. And then, Madam Speaker, you 18. What are we saying? Have capacity and resource. So even as we blame judiciary for slowing of judgments, we must also, as a parliament, blame ourselves because we have not allocated enough resources to dispense of the cases that we have. Madam Speaker, in clause number 46, that will be my second last point, is on the liability question against the EACC or person. This question has not been answered by the committee. I don't know why. That sometimes the EACC officers or any other entity can act overzealous. I don't know, Madam Speaker, sometimes they are private prosecutors. I don't know in this case of EACC liability, if they are arresting somebody and they destroy their property, where does it? Because the committee says is mandated but to ensure compliance and conflict of. The Senate, we had said, we had, of course, prevented them, but where do you stop the liability? Because we have seen in many cases, when the arrest happened, Madam Speaker, is it, we need to know. Because we don't want to see SEC coming to your house and turning upside down everything without proper investigative mechanisms. I know they can get, so that we, and then liability. What happens if they arrest you with milk or with tomatoes and they take to custody, that tomatoes, and who should be held accountable and liable? So I think on the issue of liability, I agree, Madam Speaker, that we need to prevent these people and criminal proceed. But to what extent? I think that is what we need. Even the president, there is a level a president can be given exemption from liability to a particular, especially they should have day on discharge of official duty. I think that should have been the essence of moving, Madam Speaker. On the issue of management of conflict of interest, I think on this one, the committee has said, therefore, the repeal of Public Ethics Act is necessary, which I agree. But all said and done, this matters has been captured in the Integrity Act that should have been, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I agree that we need to clean up the laws that we fight against corruption. This last remark. We need to agree, clean up the laws that fight. But I've told you, Madam Speaker, about our values as a society, the ability and capacity. Does EACC have enough capacity to fight white-collar crime? Does it have a capacity? Most of the papers, they have resources to follow the money that what we call Senator, the islands, Cayman Islands, tax where they hide the stolen loot. Where is it? Yeah? Tax havens like Cayman Islands. You remember the famous case of KPLC, Kishu, and the rest. Or does it have, can they have capacity to go and follow up in Dubai? In many other cases, madam? Does this issue of lifestyle audit, can it be done? Officers who just get offices, when you go to the village or when you pass big towns, you are told this apartment, the other day, not even afford to pay even 1 or 2 liters of driving 2,000 cc. One gentleman is driving 1,500 cc. We have even told of an officer who used to fly from here to Machakos via helicopter because they have a lot of money at this point. So we need also to work on the lifestyle audit. I agree, you know, we don't want to criminalize wealth and glorify poverty, but we must be very realistic. I think one of the reasons, and Senator who seconded has said, one of the reasons that Gen Z rose up was on this opulent. The former United States America ambassador and for meeting, was it Michael Reinberger? Who are eating, and that is what is happening. We are not saying civil servants, they should of course ensure they discharge their duty with all the power, but also we must be realistic as a country. What works for us? What is important as a country? So I've realized this mediation version of the bill was more of a cleanup, conflict of interest bill, but let us be careful. Let us not pass the laws to just make World Bank another Bretton Woods happy at the expense of how we are as Kenyans. There are things that can work and things that cannot work. But this conflict of interest is one that has been defined. Madam Speaker, I want to clarify, conflict of interest under Section 4 Economic Crimes Act is already defined. So the question is, what is it that they want to achieve? And I think if we look at this bill, it will be very, but I am still disappointed. I want to challenge the committee that let us also now push, prosecute. If it is in Nandi, if it is in West Port, Senator Omtata, I can see your governor is constructing many things here in Karen and all over the place. When he was not a governor, I will give you private. So what is happening? People are having wealth that they cannot even explain, and wealth. When somebody, Madam Speaker, with those many remarks, I oppose.
Senator Omtata.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the. And it's always a big honor to speak after the bull of Nandi. Indomitable Senator Chererkei. Thank you very much for what you have made. And having looked at the report, we are making a new law called the Conflict Act. It's a bill right now. The long title calls itself a bill for an act of parliament, provide for the management, conflict of, and for connected purposes. I wish it had read as a bill to stop theft of public assets. We run the risk of covering the theft of public assets, very, very many poetic and beautiful words. Yes, we're going to have this law. But I don't see capacity to resolve the question of theft of public assets, which is really the problem at the heart of the issue. It's important, I agree, that the conflict of interest, and as the bill says, be managed and be regulated. You have got many provisions that say where somebody is conflicted,
they pronounce their conflict, and if it is going to blur their judgment, they're supposed to remove themselves from a particular process. We wait to see how far the bill will go when it becomes law.
It's now 6:30 p.m. Time to adjourn the Senate. After you have it. And for the record, I would like to report that orders number 12 have been deferred. The Senate therefore stands adjourned. 5